Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to What Unfolds from Inclusive Co-Creation with Children and Young People workshop with Unfolding Theatre. Our session today is part of our Imagine If conference series this year, exploring the theme, Imagine If today and every day, each child and young person had access to arts and culture. That's the theme for the week. My name's Charlotte, and I'm one of the area managers here at Culture Bridge North East. And for those of you who don't know much about us, we are Art Council England's bridge organisation for the North East. And we connect the education and the cultural sectors together to provide brilliant cultural education opportunities for children and young people in the region, no matter what their circumstances are. And every year this seems to be becoming more and more important, as I'm sure you'll agree. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please be reminded of our delegate guidelines that were sent out in the joining packs. So things like remaining muted, unless you're speaking. If you need to look away for anything, that's fine. Just you can pop your camera off and then rejoin. Some people will be working from home and doorbells can go and Amazon parcels can go, so that's absolutely fine. We'll see you when you're back. So please make sure you've got your name and your organisation on your screen. You can also put your pronouns on there too, if you like. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box or any comments, and we can go through them at the end of the session or in between talks. We also have Faye Alvey here today. Hi, Faye, providing BSL interpretation. So we gathered consent in your booking forms, but just a reminder that we are recording the session today, and because we're going to make a digital resource from it, and you'll be able to see that on our website and our YouTube channels in a couple of weeks' time. So please feel free to share your workshop experience as well on social media today by using our hashtag and Twitter handle. So we are at Culture Bridge NE, and the conference hashtag is Imagine If 2022. So now it's my pleasure to introduce and hand over to our speakers today. We've got Annie Rigby, who is Artistic Director, and we've got EJ Raymond, who is Creative Associate, both from Unfolding Theatre Company. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm going to hand over now.
Hello, everyone. It's really lovely to see you, and thank you for that introduction. So yes, I'm Annie, and this is my sign name, Annie. This means yellow. EJ said I had a sunny aura. That's for you to decide. And I'm here with EJ, and EJ's sign name is this. They were being a bit shy and saying they wanted me to introduce them before they talk later. But yes, we're from Unfolding Theatre, and we're based in Newcastle. The company has been going for about 14 years, and we make big-hearted theatre that brings people together. And we're particularly interested in bringing people together who might not normally share a space, or might be people who sit on different sides of a social division, whatever that might mean. And our work with children and young people is really at the heart of this. So what we wanted to do this morning is share with you some of our principles about how we co-create with children and young people and what we've seen unfold from this. When I say we're going to share our principles, I don't feel like I have rules about how we work or a kind of written up methodology. I feel like we're always learning as we go along. So these are our principles, things that feel important right now. And I'm really interested in then making space for you to have a conversation about your practice, and particularly around your ambitions around co-creation, the things that matter to you, the things that you want to develop. But before we talk, we thought it might be nice to just share a few images of some of the projects that we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to share my screen. And here is a photo of a show called Free School Meals, which we made in 2021. It was a collaboration with children in Byker and Walker in Newcastle. And as you can see, it was set in a restaurant run by children. And that piece was very much a response to Marcus Rashford's brilliant campaign about food poverty and the disaster of the free school meals offer during the pandemic. But really, it was about activism and about hope and about believing that things could be better. I'm also going to talk a little bit about a project called Multiverse Arcade that we made actually about 4 years ago, but how that has developed our long-term work with children and young people. It was a video and audio installation that we presented at the Mining Institute in Newcastle as part of the Great Exhibition of the North, but also toured to community centres and youth centres and schools across the Northeast and asked young people, what is the change we need to make now to save the future? And it was made with young people in Newcastle and in Hexham. So it had amazing arcade booths that projected onto your hands. It was really fun to work on. And then Northeast Deaf Youth Theatre, which is a really new project, which EJ has led for us since they joined the company as creative associate at the beginning of this year. And so we had a summer intensive week, and also we've just done a Halloween Spooky Tales get together. So there's just a little glimpse of that project in action. So to start talking about our principles, I'm going to say principle 1, I'm calling make the right invitation. If you want to co-create, you have to start somewhere. And often that might be a call to action. It might be about trying to bring a group together or to bring an idea of something to an existing group. And often when we think about these invitations, we think about them in practical ways. So we think about recruitment, printing flyers, posting social media, spreading the word, thinking about where and when these workshops or activities might take place. And it is practical, but it's so important from a creative point of view. And for me, it's a really important moment to listen and pay attention as well. So, for example, with Free School Meals, we brought an invitation and an idea. We said we want to make a show set in a restaurant run by children. We were very honest at the beginning that we wanted that show to explore food poverty, activism, and hope. And we wanted to make it with children for whom that might be relevant and might feel meaningful, but we didn't want to label anyone. We didn't want to ask anyone to share anything about their experience. We wanted to make a space where children were powerful and had agency. And so we put out the word, and it was really interesting. We visited various community spaces in Byker and Walker, and I remember being there with our producer, Michael. We visited a really great space in Walker that had a kitchen built into it, and I thought, oh, this is going to be perfect. And we walked away, and Michael said, but nobody's here. And then we went to Byker Primary, invited us to think about using one of their spaces. It didn't have a built-in kitchen in the school gym. In fact, we were going to have to work in the yard outdoors a lot because this was right in the midst of COVID restrictions still. And there was lots of reasons why it wasn't practical, but it was full of energy and it was full of people. And Michael very wisely said, we need to go where people are. We need to not think about, we can work around the practical things we need, but we need to follow where people are. And I thought that was a really wise thing to think about. And we also had relationships with families that we'd built from visiting families on their doorsteps during the pandemic, doing a storytelling project called Doorstep Stories. So we invited those children too, and 55 children turned up on our, for our first taster workshops. And they absolutely loved the invitation to cook. And we're still working with a lot of the children and young people from this project, and it remains their favourite thing. But also, I was really happy that at the end of making that piece in a post-show discussion, one of the children said, we got to talk about things that were important. And that was for her what had been really meaningful about the project. And for me, that felt really important, that the invitation felt right. And it felt fun, but it also felt meaningful for them. And I felt really pleased because it was a project that ended up being made very fast within the middle of those COVID restrictions. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't a perfect project in terms of how it could be planned and thought through. We had to think on our feet a lot. But that's an example of it going right. Sometimes the invitation is not right. And we've all been in these situations. Sometimes you put something out and people don't respond, or a group do come, but it's not the people you were really thinking of when you imagined the project. And I think that's a really important moment to listen when you're co-creating. So in a sense, there's two options. Can the project shift to meet the people who have come? Perhaps that's the right way forward for that project. Or if you're not reaching the people you want to, why not? Sometimes you have to think beyond the channels you might normally promote your work through, the relationships you have. You've got to be really honest with yourself and be led by the community you want to reach. And for us, EJ is going to talk in more detail about North East Deaf Youth Theatre later on. But when EJ first came to us and proposed that we might launch North East Deaf Youth Theatre, they reminded us or pointed out to us that, they were interested in doing this, working with a hearing company. Now, I'd never thought of Unfolding Theatre as a hearing company, but of course we are. We've done we up until that point had done a few BSL interpreted shows, but our identity was absolutely that of being hearing. And so the journey that we have had to go on to think about, how do we build trust? How do we communicate? Where do we communicate? And where do we recognize that we're not in certain spaces and the time it might take? I think it requires real honesty and really thinking, that invitation, it might be something that needs to happen again and again and again. Over a long period of time, or, there's lots of different ways. But that's the first principle. Make the right invitation, or if it's the wrong invitation, be honest about it. Principle 2 is bring all of yourself. So co-creation is exactly that. It's about finding ways to be on an equal footing as creatives with children and young people, or whoever you might be working with, and to make something that you can only create if you work together. And I think so often I find artists can be quite nervous about how they bring their own artistic practice into a co-creation space. I spend a lot of time trying to build that confidence in the artists we work with, because co-creation is not just responding to the children and young people in the room. You, as an adult, as a creative practitioner, as an artist, as a teacher, have a massively larger frame of reference than the children might have or the young people might have. You bring possibility. And it's not co-creation if you're not making that available to the creative process. I see a lot of projects where it's very, very sensitive about, we'll only do something that the children and young people have suggested, have described. And I think it's important. It's important to give co-creators agency. But, you know, those children that we made free school meals with would have never come to us as a company and said, we want to make a show set in a restaurant run by children. That was a possibility that we could imagine, but we couldn't have made it on our own. It could only become something if they wanted to step into that space. So I think, you know, I think that's a really interesting thing about how you bring your own creativity into a space and how you have confidence about that creativity in responsiveness, in dialogue to the children and young people's creativity. And I think a lot about structure when we're co-creating. Like, what do we bring? How is it exciting, responsive, enabling? And I think about this because actually blank pages are really difficult. Sometimes bringing a blank page, anything's possible as a starting point, can be quite tough. It's quite tough to make into that space. But if you've created a structure, an invitation that gets people going, of course, then you can dismantle the structure if it's wrong later down the line, but you've started a journey together. You've kind of given a chance for people to step into something. And I think a lot about structure, and I think a lot about confidence. I know I've co-created quite a lot of projects. I know what the journey needs to look like to get to a place to share work with a public audience. But the children and young people we might be collaborating with might not have that confidence. So that really needs looking after in bringing all of yourself. You need to bring your artistry, but you also need to share that it's okay if this feels like it's not coming together. This always happens as part of a process, as well as that kind of creative activities and thinking. So principle 3 is be prepared to be surprised and change everything. And this is kind of the flip side of principle 2, because once you've started co-creating, you need to make sure it's responsive to the children and young people taking part. And that means being open to change. So as a little example of this, when we made free school meals, one of the things we asked the children that we worked with was, what are the rules of your restaurant? You know, can you eat your pudding first? Do you have to finish everything? You know, what we were imagining rules around food and around how you act in a restaurant. But the children responded to that question in a much bigger way. So one of their rules was no racism. They had thoughts about gender and about expectations, particularly about girls, what girls were expected to do and not to do. And they wanted to make space for that within the framework of the show. So we had to really open the script up. We had to make the space to reflect that. And I'm really pleased that we did, because actually I think that was where the best and most impactful part of that work came from. It was right that we went in with this investigation that was around food, but we really opened up to the children saying, like, this is the world we want to see. How do we get there? It can be really scary to leave space and change a plan. I often think that having a plan is like having a security blanket. So if I go into a workshop or if I go into a project and I've got my plan written out in my notebook, I feel safe. But sometimes we need to let go of that plan. Sometimes we need to check, who is that plan looking after? And if it's just looking after me and making me feel safe, but it's closing down the possibilities of the people I'm working with, it's not a good plan anymore. And I think this is something I would say I've got better at as I've gone further in my career. it takes confidence to be able to abandon a plan and say, I'm going to respond in this moment. I'm going to see what's coming up and move with that. But it's one, and it's not always right to abandon a plan. But I say that just as something that I've found really useful. Only last week I ran a workshop with knowing that I didn't have enough of a plan and felt terrified. And actually the space it left for the people who were in that workshop to create and make was really, really inspiring. And I'm really pleased I did it the way I did it. So yeah, that's principle 3, be prepared to be surprised. And the last principle I want to share, although like I say, this is just a list of things that feel important to me now, is co-creation takes time. Be ready to go slow, be ready to go fast. So I think being prepared to be surprised is also interesting in relationship to this 4th principle. And one of the things I've thought a lot about recently is how do we respond to co-creation beyond the lifespan of a project? How can co-creating be the fuel for our long-term artistic ambitions? And I say this with a massive caveat that I am enormously lucky to lead an organisation that has some financial security. So we're funded as an Arts Council national portfolio organisation. I'm feeling incredibly lucky to have just had that renewed. And that gives me the ability to think, what will we make this year, next year, the year beyond? And it isn't always possible in a freelance context or in a project-to-project context. And that's something I want to acknowledge. But I think sometimes in co-creation, something comes out that deserves to be explored beyond the lifespan of a project that we might have defined with the children and young people we're working with. And it's why I mentioned Multiverse Arcade earlier on. So that project asked children and young people, what do we need to do now to save the future? And there was lots of kind of little bits of content that kind of encouraged the children and young people to think about lots of different issues, about society, about equality, about the environment, about the built environment, about how we live. And over the course of that project, we heard from thousands of children and young people who added their voice to the arcade. And overwhelmingly, they talked about the environment. There were other strong themes, particularly around equality, but I think about 90% of them talked about the environment. And that matters to me and to Unfolding Theatre. And what I would say is environmentally themed work was not a big part of our programme back in 2018. But hearing it day in, day out, hearing the numbers of children and young people who wanted to talk about climate and, in their local area and globally, I felt like we really had to listen and we had to commit to what we were hearing. If we're serious about co-creation, that means letting those voices not just exist within the framework of a project, but helping us think about what we do next. But that thinking helped us be quick to deliver. So when an opportunity came up to apply to Newcastle LSEP, Learning Cultural Education Partnership, for their Inspired By programme, the Gosforth Academy schools wanted to do a project around raising confidence about young people's voices, but also about exploring environmental issues and particularly locally. And it was really brilliant to be able to then join dots and think, this is something that matters to us. This is something that we're understanding and thinking about in a new way because of what we've heard through Multiverse Arcade. Because we all need to be opportunistic. We don't have the luxury of completely planning the work that we deliver, the opportunities that come and don't come. But what I would say is I really think if co-creation become part of how we look at those opportunities and see the ideas we want to take forward, that to me feels really exciting. I'm going to hand over to EJ to talk in a bit more detail about just propping notes up as we speak, to talk about co-creation and their work with North East Deaf Youth Theatre and how that has been developed. So over to you, EJ.
Hello, everybody. So, as Annie mentioned, my name is EJ. I was born profoundly deaf. I grew up in a hearing family, and I went to a mainstream school throughout my childhood. And what I realised in education, there was a lot of challenges and barriers myself as a deaf person. So what I found is really trying to challenge those ideas about opportunities for deaf people. There's things, obviously, I wanted to do. I wanted to become an actor. I wanted to write. I am a theatre maker, for your information, as well. I also set up an organisation called Turtle Ear. I work as a BSL consultant of support in that area. So sort of opening up opportunities for deaf young people was very important to me in exploring that. So this is one of the reasons why we established the Deaf Youth Theatre, because a lot of deaf children have faced barriers and opportunities, and lack of opportunities really in the arts. So I thought that was very, very important that we established something that they could access. But it's obviously it's in its early stages. We've just set up the group very recently. And what we're looking at is building up a sort of trust with those young people. So what we have seen previously is that there are really limited opportunities for deaf young people in Newcastle and access to groups like this. So we thought this would be a really valuable opportunity as a way of sort of opening up their world, autistic world, giving them opportunities and experiences to explore their imaginations, come up with their own stories and develop their skills within the arts world. Like I say, it's really in its fledgling state. We only started in the summer, and we've got some small numbers at the moment, but hopefully we'll see that those numbers continue to grow as more and more young people find out about this very important project in the North East. And what's also important to me is that a space for deaf young people is that it's led by a deaf person. So it gives them the freedom to confidently develop themselves, their confidence skills with somebody that they identify with. And also a space where they can build new networks and friendships. And that felt very, very important to me. And also seeing that they can believe in themselves and not being told, as I was, that I couldn't achieve those things as a child or when I became an adult. Those things felt very important to me, that we give that space to deaf young people and children in the North East. And it's sort of the aim of this is not to say, oh, this is a group so where you can maybe become a professional actor or artist in your later life. It's just a group to explore their ideas, look at storytelling, develop self-confidence and develop relationships in a very comfortable environment with others like them. And it's looking at it's a happy place really, because of a lot of barriers for deaf young people, it impacts a lot on their mental health. So I think having that space for them is really, really important to me. It's an opportunity for them to also share their views and their own voices that they may have not had the opportunity to do so before that.
Thank you, EJ, for sharing that. There's so much more. I could listen to EJ talking about Deaf Youth Theatre for a long time, and I could say much more, but I want to say there's something about reflecting on who are you as an individual or as an organisation. And we absolutely, as Unfolding Theatre, would never have started this Deaf Youth Theatre project. I'm just checking that Faye can hear us all right. We would never have done that if it hadn't been for EJ, who we got to know through a freelance relationship, proposing it, and then us finding this way forward. And I am loving the work that we're doing. It absolutely is in tune with what Unfolding Theatre is about, in terms of people who might not normally have that opportunity, creating something to share their experience of the world. It's fun. There's a lot of laughter. And it's also really important to think about, as we grow as a company, how are we inclusive? Who is in our team? And what does that make possible? Because each of us bring with us a set of possibilities. And I think I've been going along to North East Deaf Youth Theatre Workshop so far. I love that it means that in my early BSL, I know the word for unicorn before I know a lot of other words. But I have a lot of questions about, am I, I don't think it's right for me to continue to be supporting EJ to deliver these workshops, how we continue to grow our deaf collaborators, how we recognise that it's important that who we are reflects who we want to work with and supports them to develop the best that they can be and the work that feels really meaningful to them. There's so much I could say about all of this, but I wanted to carve out a bit of time for you to talk about what co-creation ambitions or sticking points or hopes that you have in having heard us talk about this work. What's resonating with you? What little question do you have about your own work? And we're going to split you into breakout groups, just so there's a bit of a chance. I mean, it really might be just a minute or two each, just to share a little thought about, you know what, having heard this is something I want to set as a little ambition for myself around how I might approach co-creation in the next year or in the project that I have ahead of me. I want you to think about, what is it you want to achieve? How might you do it? What help might you need? And how will you keep track? How will you know? Because actually very often we're asked about evaluating the experiences of our participants, but we very rarely make space to kind of go, as artists, how is this shaping our practice? How is this fueling our ambition? So like I say, we're going to split you into groups. You might have just a minute or two each, and then we're going to come back together just before 11:15. And we're going to offer it'll be a micro opportunity for a Q&A, but if you want to put anything in the chat that you'd like EJ and I to respond to, please do. And if we don't get a chance to answer it in this Zoom, we'll send you a little email afterwards. So I think Abby is going to split you into break-off groups now. And Faye, maybe if we stay here so we're still together. So I was just saying, there's never enough time. I hope you had good conversations. What I imagine happened is you had beginnings of a conversation that might have so much more left in it. I am going to invite people. We haven't really got time to go around and hear from everyone. But if you would like to share something in the chat, which is something that you've taken from today or something you're asking yourself around co-creation, please do stick it in the chat. Likewise, if you have a particular question you'd like to ask myself or EJ, stick that in the chat. And we've only got 2 minutes, but if we can, we'll try and answer it. And we've answered Jenny's your question about the project and where it's based. We've just popped that in the chat. So yeah, do type away. Send us any thoughts or questions. And also, thanks for coming. It's really lovely to see you all. In the reply to Jenny's question, I've put a link to North East Deaf Youth Theatre, and I've also popped on my email address. So if there is anything that you wanted to ask after this workshop, or if you wanted to find out more about our work, have a look on there. Chris, really interesting thinking about from the perspective of a receiving house where, you know, you're presenting work that, yeah, you might not have that relationship with the kind of making process. One person I would recommend is somebody who's working alongside Rachel and I on another project, Anthony Hope at Sunderland Empire, which is also a receiving house, has done some brilliant work. They're part of Ambassadors Theatre Group around how they engage children and young people. So I'm just suggesting somebody who's offered he hasn't come to offer his own services, but if you're ever interested, I would look him up. I think they're doing some really interesting work.
Steph is his colleague. So Steph is in the room, who also works for Creative Learning, who I'm sure will also, Well,
and I'm sure, Steph, I have yet to work with you directly, but I'm sure you're as brilliant as Hope. So yeah, check out Sunderland Empire. That's my chat. Thank you, Vicky. Really, lovely reflection about, and pertinent reflection about people being told about their limitations and making space to get rid of that. It's really, really lovely to hear all of these. I'm going to save the chat and I might Google and drop some of you a line afterwards. But thank you so much for coming. Like I say, I've put my email address in the chat. EJ's is the same, just says EJ at the beginning, ej@unfoldingtheatre.co.uk. It's Hope's birthday today. Happy birthday, Hope. And do stay in touch. Good luck with all of your brilliant projects. These are tough times, and I really, we all need a bit of love and inspiration and belief. And so I'm really excited. I'm really excited to be part of this community. I'm feeling both close and far away in this Zoom moment. So just sending love and hope to see you all very soon. Don't know if you want to say anything to say bye, EJ?
I would love to meet you all in person at some point in the near future. And as Annie said, if you have any questions for me, please feel free to get in touch with me anytime. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming, everyone.
Thank you on behalf of Culture Bridge North East as well for that really inspiring talk. It's been really good, and something that stuck out for me was the thing that you said was it's fine to abandon a plan, leave space for children and young people to create and make and prepare to be surprised. And that really stuck with me. So thank you so much. And thank you for all the delegates for attending as well. I hope you had a really good time. I can see that you did. And today's workshop has been recorded, so you can go back on and watch yourselves again and share with a friend. All the links are going to be found on our website soon in the next week or so. And if you wish to join us again this week for more imaginative sessions, we've got them running all week. We've still got places on some of our sessions. So if you look on our imaginative webpage, you can book on through that. We also have lots more events coming up after this week as well. We're starting with a Secret World of Schools programme, a new series, and we're calling it School Dinners. You don't get your dinner though because it's on Zoom, but it's about looking at key issues facing schools right now. So the half-an-hour talks from teachers and educational leaders. So please do book onto those. And a feedback form has been sent out today as well. So we're really grateful if you could fill that in and return it to us so we can find out what you thought. And that's it from us. So thanks for attending Imagine If, and we look forward to seeing you all really soon.